Oh, welcome back.
Thank you, Bhapu.
Maha-chela is back. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we were discussing issues of the blood earlier in the back porch, and talking about how maybe a son can show up as a father figure for a mother.
The son is father figure for the mother.
The daughter can do that.
The son is representing the lineage of the male gene, masculinity, and so when a mother is talking to her son, she's in effect also talking to her father and her grandfather, and what the male energy is in the line. She's not just speaking to her boy. Right? Her boy is born of her blood, which is born of their blood, and so we have to understand that kind of connection, see, psychic connection with the ancestors. Right? Now, a boy's still a boy, and so we have to be able to differentiate a boy, a male son, from, let's say, an ancestor, but also understand that through that energy of the sun, the so-called sun, that energy manifests because that sun is representing the male line, just as if you have a daughter, she's representing the mother and the mother's line. See? We have to know how to, it's kind of I guess we can call it a perception of psychic significance. What is the son saying that the grandfather would say to her for her safety and for her benefit? What is the daughter saying for the same reasons? See? As representing the mother, as it pertains to someone whose safety is, or state of, let's say, well-being is at risk. Comment. Mm-hmm.
So then, I guess in a sense it would have to do with trusting the individual, the son or the daughter, because they could also be coming from the negative aspects of that bloodline, which is possible.
That's why I say, as it regards the safety and betterment of the individual.
Best interest.
So we're talking about the best interest of the blood, and if we're appealing to the ancestors, we're appealing to the goodness and beauty of such beings, right? The good ancestors, the good spirits, right? Or what she, as representing her blood, understands what the best interest of the family line is from her experience with her mother and her grandmothers and other women in the line. Well, as ridiculous or humorous as it sounds, you who have daughters, maybe also at some point talking to your female ancestors. It could be the spirit of your great-grandmother. It's possible. See? That's how the ways of spirit works. See? Hugh. Another aspect to this dilemma concerning the blood, or law perhaps concerning the blood, is one making the mistakes of their ancestors. Is that possible? And we know that's possible because the blood carries on. See? Sometimes the best is carried on, and sometimes the worst is carried on through the genes and through the blood and through the lack of development, spiritual development of the individual.
So does knowing the blood well enough,
Or the history of the blood, yes.
the history, to know whether you're going against it or whether you're going with it, is that significant?
It depends on what you're trying to do with your life. Sometimes the effect of trying to climb a mountain, and sliding down, instead of climbing and being secure on the mountain, or whatever the ambition might be, has to do with the ancestry. And so psychics and natives have ways of treating that. So you have to offer prayers. In some cases, you have to talk to those ancestors and say, okay, all right, I'm seeing as an individual a child in the family or a student of some operation or maybe a professional of some sort is having difficulties, that they're trying and doing everything that they're supposed to do to make this work, and for some reason they just keep sliding back down and not able to cover ground. See, that could be a man or a woman. That could be relative to relations. It could be relative to a professional occupation. It could be relative to music. It could be relative to intelligence, intellectual pursuits. It could be relative to anything. See, that requires discipline that, an individual in a family may be having inordinate difficulty with, like feeling barriers and blocks. It could be the effect of an ancestor as related to the family but not closely related, that there's a complication concerning their connection with a particular person's blood. See? So it could be a cousin. See? So it's possible. This is theory. But in the psychic world of, let's say, blood karma, all of these things are possible. See? So we need to know ourselves and know what we do and what we've done to others to be able to get a better sense of what we need to clear up for the sake of others and also for the sake of our children as well as ourselves and our siblings, if we have any siblings. Right? How to clear the path for others is a very important topic. Yes, for certain people, then they can call this a matter of bad blood, right? And not being able to see into the ancestry where certain complications were created, right? Because of wrongdoings or evil deeds or negative actions and so on. Hatred, right? You got to watch out for that, hatred, because that sets up all kinds of problems, not just in this life, but ongoingly. It's part of a continuum. You have to kill it. You have to burn it out somehow. You have to get back to love. People, you have to love one another, especially family. Okay? To clear the path, you have to love your people.
So having that bad blood, should that be one's fuel or encourage someone to transform it in order to be free of it?
Well, recognizing bad blood is reason to practice. Right? Enter serious, let's say, spiritual practice, purification practice, self-transcending practice, ego, let's say, dissolution practice. And that's not just for the family, that's for humanity. Right? Because what you see happening in the world is it's not just on the individuals, but it's on what the individuals inherited that moved them to be as bad as they seem to be acting and as hateful as they are. It's something that the families cultivate and are sort of bonded together on. These issues of hatred and revenge and unhappiness, suffering, it's all suffering. So for us to go deeper into the spiritual side of our nature, and that's an important major step towards purifying not only ourselves but our people. See? And so, that's what spiritual practice enables people to do, because it's not just a little prayer here and there. It's a way of life that enables you to watch your negativity coming up and arising generally, like in your voice, in your tone, in your words, your speech, your mind, right? Your ideas, your prejudices and biases, and say moods, your emotions, your negativity, your cycles of anger and so on, and what you do, your actions, speech, right? Actions, and what your, let's say, heart has in it. See? So each one of us is a purifier. Each one of us can shift from the negative to the positive and say, all right, I hear what this is about, being a good spirit. and I'm committing now to being the best of the good spirits I can be for the sake of myself, my relations, and my family, and then beyond that, the world. So beyond that, the universe, which is how the deeper and more, let's say, advanced spiritual people operate more from the universe reality itself. So,
so we were talking about the ideal of spiritual purification, and
spiritual practice in general, true spiritual practice,
right, with the goal of
purification of practice,
with the goal of bringing out the best of one's, the best spirits in one's line, or however you want to look at it, just bringing out the best in one's being.
Living is a debt. See, it's the working off of the debt of the family to live, to reincarnate. It's to have an opportunity to get it right, to do it perfectly, see, to enter enlightenment, so that whatever you do is no big deal. See, that's the ideal. See, that's the highest mission, is to be close to, let's say, godliness, as they call it, or holiness, as some call it, sacredness, as others call it, or nativeness, as some others would call it, right? The spiritual, as others would call it, being close to the spiritual. Not necessarily the religious, but the religious is a step towards that, spiritual. See? It's a step on the way. See? So being in a church yesterday, an Episcopalian church in this area, it was like being at home. When I was in school, St. Charles Borromeo, right, in Brooklyn, right? And having the priest and the nuns, and the presence of the practitioner was like very beautiful, because they are cultivating their innocence, see, their goodness. See? Because sometimes that's what it takes to feel the real burden of human incarnation, is to be around people who are practicing, and your heart can be, let's say, recovered to a sense of sacred function, because you see these people who are giving up their life, let's say, to the Christ image or the energy of the spiritual. Could be the Buddha, right, which is an ideal in the East, or any one of other images that are serving the same purpose, see, of going to the spiritual, so that rather than just suffering your family's karma, your blood karma, what you can do is start to tap into your spiritual karma, the good blood karma, see. It's there. You have the good blood, right? And it's usually allowed to become bad blood because of not knowing what to do with the blood that is ultimately good in all cases. But we need to know, as practitioners, that the word of the good blood can help others recover their good blood. The message of the good blood can help bring others to an awareness of that possibility in their own case, so that all bloods, say, white, all the races, say, who are part of the human family, right, part of the solar systemal reality of beings, and there are other beings on other planets, no doubt, in our solar system, but we can't see them because they're subtle beings. See? They're part of the essence. They're the essence beings of each one of the planetary forces, which is a world unto itself. That means it's inhabited. It's serving to be fed off of, see, and feed other kinds of energies to the rest of the solar system, the family here. Same as the sun, feeding us, and up to a point, taking our lives at the same time. All right? Time, space, energy, and matter. These are used for both living and then exhausting the life, which is what living is for, right? To move on. Yeah. So there's this potential. That's why the Dharma is considered such a great and wonderful reality for others and all beings. Phew. A major step, for some it's a minor step, but it's a major step generally for people who are, say, between worlds, right? But they're practicing, see, to attain consciousness of a deeper, higher, or more perfect world, let's say. And we're referring to the spiritual world, if there is such a thing. For many people who are in the body is the only world for them. The physical world is the world. It's it. It's the beginning and the end of their worlds. They don't know anything else. They can't perceive anything else. See? But there's always a sense, and it's possible to capture that sense when you know that you're in the universe. And we're receiving the sunlight, but what does it mean to feel and know the sun? Which is, where it is. Right? But we are the sun. We are fed by the sun. This is what was meant by being fed. See, we are nourished by the universe in various ways. So we are the universe, in effect. We are the universe. But we're informed, so we are a part of it. But your consciousness is what the universe is. Without form. It's the formless intelligence of the universe. That's the spiritual nature of it. We can sit here enjoying the sun and the light and the trees, and there are a lot of trees here. There's a tree land here. And still, if we're talking about the trees are fed and nourished by the radiations from the universe, the solar system, beginning with the solar system and extending beyond this solar system into all the other solar systems, all the way to the source of infinity itself, to the boom. See? It's the big boom. Right? The dit. See? See? The infinite dot of it all. Right? The point. Mm-hmm. Because we are the everything of the nothing, and we are the nothing of the everything, which is paradoxical. See? But every night when you go to sleep, we have to remember the most basic fact. You go to sleep into emptiness. See? Not just the darkness of sleep, but the non-existence of sleep. See? The emptiness, radiance, and gloriousness that sleep is, to enable us to come back revived and ready to kind of like be born again into this life in the next day, right? In the morning, right? The rebirth. See? So we're going through a microcosmic version of dying and being reborn. So we have to understand the essence of ourselves to give us a sense of the higher purpose, which is goodness, and opening the heart, not just your mind and your body to relatively physical experience, but open your heart to relatively spiritual, absolutely spiritual sort of sensitivity. That this is about the spirit. The spirit feels the body. It's not that the body, feels the spirit more, or the body is the reality more. No, without the spirit there'd be no existence. See, without the original source and power, see, of spirit, life force, see, the creative life force. Right? So first the total, right, universe, and then the personal.
Question is, should one sit alone with one's thoughts, or should one pick up a wisdom book, the Dharma?
Do both. See that your thoughts, your mind, your being is mixed with the Dharma. See? Because then it's the karma of the Dharma and the Dharma of the karma. See? And that united, blended together is exactly what good practice is about. See? The Dharma, knowing the law, knowing wisdom, crazy wisdom if need be, is part of the safe journey. So it's not to take your self-programming and your family blood karma too seriously to suffer it. See? When there is an unraveling quality to the Dharma itself that you sometimes have to read about because it's not necessarily in your culture ordinarily. So when you read about the Dharma as the law of the universal spirit, which is the deeper consciousness by implication, that's what it implies, the love of the universe, the heart of the universe, then you're going to be looking forward to a much happier time if you follow the lines as prescribed in terms of compassion and wisdom, enlightenment, and what it takes to achieve such a reality, and what that reality actually is, and how magnificent that reality is, in fact, and describing our potential spiritual, let's say, destiny in some cases. And what this is about as a life of grace, the grace of life, and the goodness, the grace is. All of which stem from the active and, infinitely loving heart itself. But we need to know that to realize it. You have to understand it to know it. You have to hear about it in some cases so that you know what it is you're really ultimately, or maybe finally, searching for and coming to terms with in this life. Which is enlightened being, which is a concept of no more problems and infinitely, great life karma, great life karma. Everything is part of a wondrous, sort of miraculous, amazing, profound, sort of sacred manifestation of what we call the heart of itself.
What do we mean by a Buddha or being Buddha?
Well, some people hear that and they think we're talking about a person of history when we're talking about the being of mystery itself. Not a person, but the being, Buddha. Awake, being awake. Awakened, conscious, knowing, beyond self. Not being limited to the body or the encasement of the self. The limits of the self, the delusions of the self, the neuroses of self, the suffering of human nature. Seeing beyond that into the truth of human nature, the spirit, the light of human nature, the true potential of human nature, which is available to all of us because it's living us. Whatever the Buddha is, the awakeness is living us all the time. So it's not a person that's living us, no, it's the reality of intelligence that is living us and turning us into good spirits. That's the Buddha nature. Liberation from suffering. That means self-conflict. self-division, self-ignorance. And what's left is this self-realization. See? There is no self that is bondage or limited or small or let's say, material as such. Yeah. Because even the material universe is part of what it is as spirit. It's the appearance of what it is as spirit. See? And so we're really the heart of Buddha nature, or awakeness, right? And are capable of all the compassion of the Buddhas. See? Those who have embraced, see, this radical understanding that the heart is first. The heart is the most important thing. And that's spirit first. See? Not form, but formlessness, which means what is really first is a paradox that you have to embrace. And so it's like loving what you can't know or don't know about what it is. What it is, man. Who knows what it is, right? No? We are what it is, but who knows what that is? So who knows what we are, that it is, as infinite intelligence? See? And there's nobody there. There's nobody. There's no one to know that. See? So the self can't know it as if it could put it in its pocket as some form it can carry around for its own purposes. No, it's infinite. See? That's the part of our nature and our potential that is worth pursuing. See? Mm-hmm. That's the spiritual, the immaterial. And so we have the paradox, the material bondage or spiritual liberation. There is no stop and go button for the function of spirit. It's not something you turn on or can turn off. It is the continuum itself of life. And so, ordinarily, what people are doing relative to other people and other things serves the self. Ordinarily. It can serve the function of spirit at a certain level, but for the most part, people do what they want to do, not always what it wants them to do. And so that's the understanding. It wants us to be serving the function of living the impersonal nature of life, so that we are equally indebted to the bugs, the animals, the trees, the wondrousness of the earth's life, right? The amazing, miraculous beauty that it shares with us. See? And because it's alive and living, it must die. And so it's getting ready to, before too long, in the history of worlds, to extinguish itself, see? Or remake itself. And that means the catastrophic transformation or cataclysm that ends the Earth's life as we see it. But it's not like a bad thing. It's inevitable because the Earth has transformed itself, let us say, infinite times over the billions of years it's been around, see? As all worlds must. Live and die. To live, to die. See? Okay. So it's part of the process. And I hope that answers your question. So, as I was saying, people do not love me for what I am, whatever that is, but they love me for what I do relative to music and some other things, see, because those things are tangible for them. See. And the real spiritual is not necessarily tangible for them yet. See. See. And so the way that we are completing this process of interconnected relating to one another is through the things that we do that can be exchanged with others who can benefit from such things, but exchanging such things does not mean that we are in tune with the source of what these things are as being beyond such things being forms of expression, right? Forms of being, and so on. And when the reality is formlessness, absolute, so formlessness, or a better word is empty of self. Whereas most beings are, by definition, right, living as selves to one another and to themselves. And that's a conceptual form of existence, but that's not all beings. Some beings are living as themselves, but they're also living as the impersonal self of themselves, right, which is even better. See? And you can call up somebody and say, are you impersonal today, or are you still the personal that I knew last night? Who are you willing to be today beyond what you were last night? And so on. Well, yeah.
Why is it that most musicians are caught up in forms, playing songs, structure?
What do you mean by caught up?
Like that's their focus. That's what they're out there to do. They're out there to play the forms, play the tunes, satisfy a certain, something, and move on. But that's their, bread and butter. That's what they're out there to do. And then,
well, that's what the self does. See, it identifies with forms as if they are real. And they can only be relatively real forms. See? So we're talking about fear of formlessness, fear of selflessness, really, fear of emptiness for the most part, fear of liberation, see? Fear of openness. See? So many of them, and we're talking about the masters too, masters of the arts, are often no better than what they're doing. There's no more to them than that. That's as good as it gets. What they can do for others, or what they can do in terms of their occupation. That's it. That's all they have. See, and many would admit if they were not able to do what they do, they'd have no existence. See? That they would care about because others wouldn't care about them. See? So this is how the world works. See? This is what worldliness is all about. See? And here's the dichotomy then between those who are transcenders of self and world, and those who are no more than self of the world. Worldly selves, see, have no inner life to speak of. They'll say they have an inner life. They have feelings, but it's not the inner life, see, that are spoken of right now. The inner life is the spiritual, see, the impersonal, transcendent intelligence of knownness, see, knownness, see, emptiness, see, selflessness, heartfulness, for real, see, spiritual realization, see, coming to terms with realizing that you're no more or better than spirit itself. See, you don't need a self to be spiritual, see, because everything is already that, and people are busy identifying themselves as one who is more or less anything else.
You've said before, no suffering, no genius. How is suffering a step on the path of genius?
Well, it's like, how can you know without experience? You need experience to know anything. It's something you have to experience. It can't be assumed that because you're present, you know something necessarily. See? Babies are born. They don't know anything. It doesn't seem like they do. Right? So we need experience. Genius, to be a true genius, has to have experience, and not just of what's good. See? That's not genius particularly. See? What's good is reality, and reality is life and death is reality. Knowing and not knowing is reality. See? Extreme suffering is touching upon the skirt of genius because it's extreme. See? So it would be the truth of say, suffering. That would be bordering on genius. Extreme. Then there's extreme happiness. It's the same thing. See, bordering on genius of happiness. It's extreme happiness. See, it's not mediocre. It's not half-cocked. See, it's full. See, to the extreme. See, genius then to the extreme is genius. For real. See, it's beyond. See, it's beyond itself. See, it's according to what exists here. Only the beyond itself is what I would properly describe as a genius. Everything else is on the way to that extreme sort of like. Power, see. Profound, see. Mad, see. Truth of what genius is about. It's not something nice or good or just merely great, as if to say, a great painting makes a great man. No, I don't think so. It has to be devastating. It has to be gone beyond. It's like not even human in a sense. It's genius. Then it's spirit. That's genius. It's spiritual. See, infinite. So moving towards that was inching towards the infinite would be the genius. See, the genius of the genius. See, the spirit of the genius, which is extreme. Gone. Genius. See. Coming.
So, according to your mother, you've had your own music from a very young age. She saw signs of you creating your own stuff, your own music. Can you speak on that?
This is reflecting now upon the original topic today regarding the blood. So it seems that I was used by the blood to manifest this at an early age because the blood, the ancestry, musical ancestry. It's common regarding musical ancestry. See, my father was a drummer, and I come out wanting to play the drums. It's kind of like the norm, so it's not like I did anything. See, I can't take any credit for what the blood does. I didn't even remember what my mother was talking about, right? So it's unconscious. It's unconscious blood manifestation of the blood's desires from former lifetimes. So we can read that if you know your ancestry. That's why it's helpful to know your ancestry, to know what's being carried over and what's being changed, what's being dropped, and what needs to be redone better relative to the blood. What one should be aware of relative to the blood. See? And not have to suffer concerning the blood. So I had it in me so it took various shapes and forms, and always from an informal viewpoint, never going to school, just knowing what it is, which is a different kind of, let's say, continuum. See, already knowing what it is, which is strange, but in my case, that's exactly how it's been. Already knowing what it is. That could be conceived of as an intuitive skill, maybe, or inheritance, intuitive, psychic, sensing, but it's not me, it's blood. See? So what the blood gave me to work with because of my karma, let's say, the karma I've been given, in terms of the spiritual works, and my ancestors who are spiritual workers. So it's consistent. It's not there's no self involved in it. It's free of self. It's selfless, egoless. So it just happens. That means it can be very powerful because it just happens. Come on.
Yeah, so then on that token of...
And you would know that because you've come to the music.
Absolutely.
And you're around me most of the time. And so you can speak to it in a certain way that it would seem to be valid to say it's a selfless manifestation of intelligence or whatever the spirit wants to make clear to others. It shows up as that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't have any doubt about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that can happen. Mm-hmm. I can't say that's the way it is for the rest of my relatives or my siblings, but that's the way it has happened in this case. As it would do it, as it would have it. Yeah, I don't have to wish for it. Things happen. They show up. I have nothing to say about that. It just is what it is. Yeah. And the idea is to try to do things better, or being open to more of the inner, and sharing that with others, and give people a sense of appreciating what that is, and as needed, recognizing what that is, because a lot of people may not recognize that they have anything to do with the inner whatsoever, and it's the most important part of our nature, is the inner nature. See? The selfless part of our being. See? And to talk about it, as I stated earlier, is to know about it. To know about it is to do something with it that's needed. See?
So then we were discussing that it's more difficult to go within and play from the inner as opposed to just copying, chops and things from a musical standpoint.
Well, for me, it's difficult for me to study music. It's difficult for me to, I can, let's say, do a minimal amount of, let's say, hardly any reading. You've never seen me do any reading. But that would be that's more difficult for me. See, it's to shut off what is given to me, so it's a handicap. And having to play what's inside all the time could be a certain kind of handicap, because it did limit me from playing with, let's say some great players. And yet I was still, nevertheless, despite that handicap, not being able to read the music, brought into the company of many great players who were willing to play with me because we had common ground relative to the kind of music we came together to play. So there's no problem there. So it could be a limitation, or it could be an asset. It depends on what the situation is. Now, from here, from this point of view of the cycle of Ozel at this time, I may be in a position now to start writing music. I'm not guaranteeing that, but I've come to be with the piano now for the first time in a certain way. See, I've always had the piano. We've had the piano now for some time, and playing on it here and there, and playing little things and enjoying it because the music's alive in this body mind, and now it's taken on a different quality now. See? And it's possible that it's taken on a quality relative to the fact that I don't have any people around me anymore. See? And not like it was.
Whole band right there.
I have, I have the piano, which it's an orchestra, perhaps, So that's possible, and we'll have to see how this develops, because I'm feeling moved now to get up, even in the middle of resting, get up and just go to the piano. And let my hands fall where they may, and then feel what it is. And it's always song. It's always interesting. It's thoughtless song, which is really interesting. Right? It's interesting, you know. And maybe it's all song. But I'm describing it as thoughtless song, because when you're talking about musicians having to copy from everybody, that's one way to do it. I think that's an aspirational way to become a musician and a better player. See, and that is to work from what's already out there and assume that, and work with becoming that as a starting point, and not really knowing what is true of oneself in the way that it could be if oneself was completely open to the inner, to let it come through, if and when that time came, if the need ever arose for that to happen. So many musicians find it easier to just assimilate what everybody else is doing and be a part of the crowd, and work that way and find their happiness doing that. I've never had to do that in a way. I mean, of course, I went through the Coltrane Phase. Most of the musicians I knew were hung up on giant steps in the late 60s and early 70s, and so that was a phase I had to go through. It's like purification by fire. If you couldn't play good giant steps, you couldn't cut the band. You know, you forget about you. You had no existence as a jazz player. Nobody was interested in anybody but that at that time. At least in circles I was brought to have to deal with, and I think it was purification by fire. It was fun to do that. Right? Somebody left me once with a record, I think it was, and they said, "Hey, listen, I'm going away for the weekend, and when I come back, I want you, you know," he was like a group leader. He said, "By the time I get back, I want you to know that, because this is what I want to play." And I said, "Done, I'll do it." So I had to hear the record. I heard the record, and I got the changes down, and I said, "Oh, this is fun, man. This is easy. It's fun. It's crazy, but it's fun." It's a good contribution that John Coltrane made. It's a different cycle, but I think those cycles exist in the classical works, which is, we call it classical, but I mean, in that area of musical expression which has done everything it can to exhaust possibilities in classical music, right? So you got to do it this way and that way and every other way if you can, and that's the classical scientific approach. I think it's useful in that sense. Comment? So that's say the easy way. It's the easy way, and I don't say it's bad. It's just an easier way, and it's the right way for many musicians, because it's the only way they're going to get there. Because it is going through that route. If depending on their attitude, if they exhaust that, then they can get to that point where they don't need any more of it, and then they're ready to step off. Because something at that point in them has been awakened to carry the individual to their own destination. That's possible.
So would that be your recommendation to, say, up-and-coming musicians?
To go that route? Yeah, I would. Exhaust it. The word is exhaustion. So if you're not exhausting it, you may not get there. So you have to be done with it. So you have to have gone to the point where you understand it, where you can see and hear something, and you know what its exhaustion is. Your mind can review it for you and say, "Oh, okay." See, the idea is to get the inner working for you. See, not the outer, right? Let's say mental, but the inner psychic. And it's superior in functioning. But sometimes the outer mental is what is needed to get to the inner psychic. Not in all cases, but generally so. It's how it is set up. See, so you go to school, you learn from school, and you do it that way. And, it may take some work for some, and may be easiest part for others, but you got to go that way. And then when you're done and what's left of you. See, the idea is to take you as far as your karmic need is, right? That far, and then open the door. So then, what your creative need is, which is different from just the karmic need. See, for training and familiarization and socialization, see, and so on, in terms of worldliness. And, yeah, there does come a point where it's just about you, and how much of you is part of the universe, right? Whereas earlier, with the mental sort of approach to it, it's how much of you is part of society, the crowd. Right? And that's what most people find comfort in. They don't want to be alone. They want to have company. You know, I think one of the terms I heard of a record 10 or 15 years ago was that genius loves genius. You know, friend, something like that. And that's a question. What does a genius need if it's a real genius?
Maybe you say like true genius doesn't need anything.
No, true genius is its own friend.